the quick introduction here. I'm Justin. I head up strategy for Wunderman Thompson across Asia Pacific. I'm based in Singapore, as I already said. Wunderman Thompson is an agency. We are one of the largest agencies in the world. We would describe ourselves as a creative, digital, and technology agency. But ultimately, the way I see it is we create work for brands that ideally that comes in contact with consumers through a variety of channels to influence the decisions they make or facilitate the decisions they make. I think you've got a great bunch of speakers today. You've got people that are going to talk about science. You've got people that are going to talk about social. I'm going to try to make this a bit of fun, and I'm going to try to talk a little bit today about brand, and we'll talk a bit about brand experience and how this influences customer and moves that forward. So to do that, we're going to talk a little about how I think brand is evolving, and why experience is so important. We're going to talk a little about how that then activates and show a couple of examples, because it's always fun to show some examples. And I know that most of the people on this call will be from the UK, so I'll try to show some examples from Asia that are a bit of fun and that hopefully people can relate to. And then at the end, we'll throw in a couple frameworks to talk about operations, because as a strategist, no presentation from me is complete without at least a couple of frameworks. So we'll throw that in there. I think the first thing that I want to say, though, is that what brand is in the eyes of a consumer, right? And ultimately, brand is something that we relate to. That is what a brand strives to be more than anything else. It strives to be something that is relatable and important to the people that they serve and to the people that they engage with. And if we think about how brands grow, and I think it's always nice to lean on some solid foundation. So here we'll go to a bit of Byron Sharp, and we'll talk about brand growth and brand performance. And we'll talk about that being a function of two things, which many of you will have read this book, but talk about it as the function of mental availability and physical availability. And I think that what I want to talk about is how that's not necessarily changing, but the way we influence those elements is evolving. Because I think that remains very true. However, when we think about digital experience and the way we can interact with our customers, with our consumers, that's changing quite drastically. And if you just look at this picture, right, you start to see a world where people had to try on shoes to see how they fit. And all of a sudden, you've got a world where through augmented reality, I can see exactly how a shoe's going to fit, how it's going to look. I might not know how comfortable it is yet. That might not be possible just through the screen, but you're already giving a dramatic level of confidence to someone who might be in the midst of making a purchase decision. And the reason I show this is just to show how what experience is doing is it is taking that moment of influence and inspiration, where you talk to a consumer, where you show them what they want, where you get them interested. And in actual fact, it's starting to truncate that journey between the moment of inspiration and that purchase decision in lots of interesting ways, and do it through either singular channel or connected journeys, but do that in a way where you can instill the confidence that used to be developed offline. So if we used to tell stories to people to inspire them about a product, and our job was to get them to come to a store, in actual fact, now we can start to truncate this and give them that same level of confidence in other ways. That really is the point here, right? So what brand building used to be is storytelling. And as an American, as everyone can tell, I've chosen a bunch of images from my childhood. Most of them will probably be recognizable, but brand building was all about storytelling and that element of building mental availability. So when I say that, the way that was done was obviously tell stories to an audience that you think are as likely to resonate with that audience, so that they're relatable, so that they're memorable, and then ultimately tell those stories frequently, so that when they're likely to be close to the point of purchase, it will be top of mind, right? And there's a recency frequency game, and that is obviously a media plan and how those things work. So this is just the basics that everyone's very familiar with. The challenge with that, of course, is that a lot of that storytelling is becoming harder and harder to land. people are moving to, or we've moved to a world where you can block ads, where you can skip ads, where you can move away, where you can eliminate those stories. And some of the platforms, the terrestrial television side of things, where we told longer format stories for such a long time and built brand, those are being eroded by platforms that ultimately, through payment and through an exchange of value, in that sense, say we will get rid of the ads for you. So all of a sudden, the way we connect with people is being challenged. And so what we're seeing is brands needing to diversify and find ways in all kinds of other areas. And I think that's the reason I bring that point up, is because that storytelling narrative is changing. How we think about experience really needs to reflect what's happening there. I really like this quote from Raja for two reasons. One, he's one of probably the most prominent, famous marketers in the world. But two, I just like the fact that someone in his position tries to be deliberately provocative and push a brand the size of MasterCard and really challenge them. And I don't tend to read things out, but I will in this instance, because I really like it. Just the fact that he deliberately tells his own team that advertising is dead, because advertising is about storytelling. So storytelling is dead. And so the future is going to be story making. And if you fast forward 10 years, the marketing and advertising mix is going to be completely different, and experiences are going to be dominant. And I think that idea of story making is all about experience. And I want to just kind of talk about why that is, because I think right now, and if I hear the sound of a can open, this is just me personal, audience of one, right? Segment of one. But if I hear the sound of a can open, it's like a Pavlovian response. Coca-Cola has spoken to me so many times in my life with that same sound that it will always mean one thing to me. It will always, just that sound will always be Coca-Cola. But that's become Pavlovian because it's been told to me so many times. If I can skip that, or if I hear that story less frequently, I don't necessarily root it in my memory in the same way. And the interesting thing about experience is that experience roots itself into memory in a much deeper and more stable way and longer lasting way than stories do. We are storytellers as humans by nature. And that is why this works so well. However, if I tell you a story today, and you will remember it for a little while, but if you actually do something, experience it yourself, have firsthand knowledge of something, that roots itself into your memories in a completely different way. So when we talk about building mental availability, the notion of experience is a much more powerful way to do that. And that's why I bring this up, because I think it's really important. So what we're seeing is this transition from stories that we tell that we hope our audience will empathize with, to experiences that we can deliver in a way that they can have them themselves, where they are the protagonist in a story that the brand features in, rather than the brand telling them what the story is. I hope that makes sense. I think that this shift from being the audience to being the protagonist is the biggest shift that we're starting to see with customer experience. And that's a really important shift in my mind when we think about how we want to deliver it as a business and how we want to empower our audience. Because ultimately, if we think about them as the protagonist rather than ourselves as the hero, it changes the dynamic completely in what we want to do with them. And the interesting thing about it is the people who get it right profit significantly. So this is not a perfect match because it is a customer satisfaction index. But actually, if you go through this index and you look at what's there, what you tend to find is that the customer experience leaders of each category are the leaders that feature in this index. And so what you tend to see is that the experience leaders outperform the laggards and even the number two in their category by a significant margin. And there's actually some great research that's been done recently that just benchmarks category by category, the number one experience brand in the category versus the number two. And what you're seeing is that the growth differential is accelerating. So that difference that you get for being the leader in your category is getting larger rather than smaller over time. So that is a significant element to consider. So the question then becomes, how do you build brand experience, and how do you build a brand in this experience-based world? And I'm going to show two examples from Asia. Then we'll get into frameworks afterwards. But I think that I just want to show a little bit of work. And this is, again, I said I was going to show some work from Asia. This is we've all seen a whole lot of work that came out during COVID. This is potentially my favorite piece of work that came out during that kind of stay-at-home moment that we all experienced. And the reason I loved it is because it wasn't different, or because it was totally different from what everyone else was doing. It wasn't empathizing with people. It was actually trying to be really useful to real people in a way that was interesting. So what Thai Airways did is they recognized that as an airline, no one's going to be traveling. Frequent flyer miles don't matter anymore. They don't have much to say, but they really wanted their brand to stay relevant. So what they did was they flipped their frequent flyer mile program upside down. They developed an entirely new app, and they launched that app. And what you did as a frequent flyer member, you would download that app, you would tag yourself at home. So it got the GPS coordinates of your home. And then so long as you stayed within 100 meters of your house, you were accumulating miles. And so you accumulated miles this way, not by travel, but actually by being at home. So it was Thai Airways' way of saying to the country, the best thing you can do right now is not go out, is stay at home. And we recognize that even as a travel brand, and we want to reward you for staying home, and we will reward our loyal members for doing what they should be doing and just stay home. And I've got a really short film. I've cut it down to a couple, like just a short 30 seconds. Let's see if it plays, and we'll go from there. So that's a short little snippet, but hopefully it gives you an idea that this wasn't the most complex app. It didn't require a massive amount of effort. It was just a smart idea of how do you create an experience that's relevant at that moment in time, but where your brand becomes useful and where your business becomes useful. And at a time where travel PR wasn't great, they wound up in a really positive place because of it. So I just wanted to share that. And the next one I'm going to talk about is MAC Cosmetics. And this is again another interesting story. And this one's from China, and Shanghai in particular. And MAC is quite famous for their color range, for kind of flamboyance, for the attitude and that they display. And China, as much as we like to think, as much as their reputation can be quite diverse and varied, the reality of China is that they are, when it comes to cosmetics, traditionally incredibly conservative. So MAC has about, 50 plus different shades of lipstick, for example. And in China, they tend to buy 3, and that's it. So this is a massive problem for a brand like this, because their whole proposition around diversity, individuality, uniqueness, it wasn't playing well to the market. And what they decided that they wanted to do was to look at how they could encourage people to privately try a greater range of product, but then also to create an environment where that diversity, if one person did try it, they would almost instantly share it with everybody else, creating kind of a viral wave to get other people to try new things and to broaden their range. And so what they did to do that was they connected the WeChat environment with the physical store. So they connected a digital environment and their physical environment. So if you walked into their store, there was a QR code when you walked into their store. You would connect your WeChat. You didn't need to talk to anybody because they don't really like people talking to them. They like to shop in private. That's what all the research said. They were then able to look at all the colors, try them on, create color palettes of their very own. Like if you had eyeshadow, for example, it would 3D print eyeshadow palettes for the consumer in the store, so they got just the colors they wanted, and you would only see an attendant if you needed them. And everything was done in a way that was, because it was through a social network in the first place, it was encouraging people to share that. So I'm going to share a quick little video on this one as well.
To Max Experience Center, a connected retail store. The result of 6 months of development, analyzing makeup purchase behavior using cognitive walkthroughs, exit interviews, and customer focus groups. MAC launched this future-ready flagship store in Shanghai, integrating both the online and offline brand experience into one seamless journey, connecting product discovery, social engagement, purchase, and loyalty. Integrating with the WeChat mini app, MAC connects all your engagements and purchases in store. From the WeChat check-in to the MAC experience checkout. This is the next level in one-to-one experience design. Of course, every customer is greeted individually. And because Gen Z customers in China dislike dealing.
So I cut off the video because it actually goes on for about 4.5 minutes. So I figured that was a bit too long for this session, but hopefully you get the idea. And I think the really interesting side of this is that they actually wound up seeing a 4x increase in sales from this activity within their store. So a massive volume increase, not just in terms of, and that came from two sources. One, it came from increased foot traffic to the store because more people talking about it, but also they saw the average spend and the average purchase size from each individual going up quite a bit. So it's a really powerful story that just shows how even what we think of as very traditional environments can have a layer of experience which is overlaid on top of it in order to add further value to what consumers actually want and drive greater value. So hopefully that makes sense. The last thing I just want to highlight is a piece of work that's completely different. So we've got one where we showed technology in a physical environment, one where we show kind of an app build, and then this is something completely different where what Wendy's did was to promote the fact that their burger meat is not frozen. They went into the Fortnite environment, and as Fortnite is a gaming environment where people fight each other and they battle each other, and they didn't battle other people. They went into the gaming environment, and there's restaurants and all kinds of things that are built, and all they did was destroy freezers. They walked into different stores and started destroying freezers. And this behavior of destroying freezers caught on and went viral. And they wound up creating this whole session where people stopped fighting each other and were just building and destroying freezers. And again, it's just this sort of experience that people will laugh about that was fun. But the reason why I bring it up is because these are all things that cement themselves into memory structures in a very different way. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight some of those elements. Obviously, the challenge here with any of these is that as you move beyond, as you move into experience and start thinking about how that works, it's often a lot more than one department within a business that's required to deliver upon it and make it really work. And so when I think about this and when we think about it, we really think that to get this right, it takes aligning 4 different elements: the creativity, the uniqueness, the content, the individuality that your brand always puts out, the technology, the platforms that are there to facilitate and enable that, the data and the intelligence and the feedback loop to understand how do you actually communicate with people. And probably most important of all, the operating model within your own organization to allow your teams to work together effectively, to create the right volumes of content, depending on what kind of experience you want to create and what you want to enable, but to allow those processes to work in a way that feels natural and seamless. And the challenge that we see quite often in the work that we do is a focus on one of these 4 without balancing it against the other four. So an enablement of technology without an understanding of the impact on activation and operating models tends not to deliver the value and the experience that you might have put into a business case from that technology build in the first place. Or a focus in one area without balancing it and recognizing that each of these have almost like Newton's law. If you apply pressure on one of them, there will be equal pressure put on all of the others. And we tend to see that when not balanced, that's where the challenge comes in. One further element to look at is obviously maturity models as we start to think about how that works, because ultimately when we think about these experiences, typically what we see is people not wanting to create. I mean, the example of Wendy's is an experience in a single channel, but oftentimes people are looking at how do these experiences carry across channels, in much the way the Mac one did. So you've got that, and then you're looking at how do we move from something which is mass market to something that's really contextual and not just personalized to an individual, but personalized within the moment, so it's most helpful at that time. And as we move up that maturity curve, there's elements that technology can deal with on its own. The bottom layer, moving left to right, is actually not always the hardest part, because depending on the organization, because you can put technology in place that takes you from left to right. However, you typically find within organizations different owners of different channels or different fulfillment layers and different activities. So moving from the bottom to top, it tends to be where challenges arise from an operations level, and where you need to start looking at those operating models and how these things actually relate. So these are just the things to watch out for as we do that. Obviously, that's the challenge. But when we get it right, what it really lets you do is become a brand that recognizes people, remembers people, listens, senses and responds, respects values, and ultimately the idea is becomes more human in what we do. And when we can behave more human, in a more human way to customers, to the consumers, what we find and what we believe is that roots itself more fundamentally into the memory structures of that consumer and help them bring back and drive the behaviors that we all want to see when we want to grow our business. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna leave it with that and say thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them if I haven't already run way over time.